So, Alan, thank you for coming on to the podcast. So you started your adolescent footballing career at Bolton Lads Club. You then moved on to Manchester United. So you were Sir Alex Ferguson's first ever acquisition at the football club. You then moved on to Exeter City, and then sadly your footballing career came to an end down to a serious back injury. Since your footballing career, you've re-engaged with academia. You're now a doctor in sports psychology. You're also a big advocate for raising mental health awareness, especially in football as well as maybe away from football as well. And you're also a co-commentator for BBC Devon. First question then is, what's your first memory of playing football? What was life like growing up in Bolton?
Yeah, good. Like a lot of other young people, my dad was a reasonable footballer himself. Got to a decent level, played for teams like Bury and played in Oldham's reserve, so lower league stuff. So I had a bit of a pedigree there. But he always laughs me, Dad, and said he met me mum at 19, 20, and then his football career kind of sort of went downhill after that. But yeah, just some good times really. Just in the garden with my dad at home, and he put some goals together for us that we used to sort of practice in, and we always used to live out dramatic moments. It'd always be the last minute in cup finals or the last kick of the game to win a league or something like that. All these scenarios that kind of that hinged on a last minute thing. So we had some great times, and all I can remember, Chrissy, is any time we went on holiday or any time we kind of went, we had a bit of spare time, I'd probably be right in the park, and my dad and my brother would be setting up goals. And my dad was kind of a Manchester lad, so I traditionally, like a lot of families, usually follow the sort of the lineage, and his love of United, back into used to talk about the Busby Babes in the 50s, and then my dad used to watch United in the 60s and the 70s with the best Lord Charlton era, and he said some great memories from them. So a love of Man United was kind of passed on to myself, and so whether I wanted it or not, that's the way it was, and and that sort of love of United was kind of formed from quite a young age really.
Playing football, coming into kind of your teenager age, opportunity to go and play for Manchester United in terms of their youth setup. Can you talk to me a little bit about that experience?
I went to a few clubs first before I joined United. I'd had trials at Bolton Wanderers, so they offered me schoolboy forms. I'd also been down to the blue side of Manchester, had trials with City, and again that was the chief scout at the time was a fellow called Ken Barnes, and he sort of said he offered me schoolboy forms as well, but I always got advised that I just don't rush into anything. I was training in United's School of Excellence at the time. They used to train on a Monday and Thursday night at a place called The Cliff in Lower Broughton, and I ended up sort of training there. And then what happened, Christy, was United had an extended trial around the Christmas period. This is going back a long time now. It was the Christmas period in 1986, so Alex Ferguson arrived in November 86, and I think he wanted to sort of put a stamp down, and at the time I think City had kind of the maybe the best side of Manchester in relation to recruiting youth players. They were doing quite well in the FA Youth Cups, and I got invited down there and I had a really good trial. I played really well in that week, and bizarrely enough it went over the New Year, so I got invited down to the Cliff. I think it was about the 28th of December, and then I had to stay over because I was only 14 at the time. Stay over in halls of residence, and that stayed over the New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. So it was a bit crazy. So we went to watch it, and took us to watch the first team play on New Year's Day. And at the end of that trial, the fella who was the youth development officer at United got a lad called Joe Brown. So we'd like to offer you terms now. You're thinking, well, I've been at Bolton, I've been at City, United offering me, I think this is kind of the time. So in a funny kind of way, it's probably I would say maybe my heart ruling my head, and if any youngster is coming through football at the moment, I'd probably advise them just to make sure it's right for you. Just because it's your team that you follow doesn't mean that the culture's right, the coaches are right. And so I signed for United, and I remember after that bit of news where they said we'd like to sign you, I got a lift home from the trial and just sped down my drive in through the front door. I said to my mum, my dad was at work, my mum was United want me to sign, which was amazing. And then when my dad arrived from work, used to get in about 5:30. to tell him that as well. I think it was like a very, very proud moment. So yeah, it was over the moon. So yeah, that's kind of how I got recruited into United.
A key point that you mentioned then, so you said in terms of selecting the team to go, obviously you had different trials, but selecting Manchester United, you said the team was right and the culture was right. What was right about Manchester United within those areas?
I think it's kind of like, this is like the other way around. I'm saying it might not have been right for me, just because I sort of signed for United, my heart ruled in my head. The culture was very ruthless, it was very harsh.
In what sense?
Well, I think it was just just different times in football. Yeah. It was quite. I think more aligned with working class tradition. A lot of masculine, ruthless, kind of brutal behaviour. So I come through the kind of the B teams and the A teams. The B teams is kind of like what you played as still a schoolboy, and then the A team was kind of the first step on the ladder, as it were. So back then, Chris, you had 4 teams: B team, A team, reserves. Right. Which is the under-23s now, and then the first team. So B team schoolboys, A team used to be a mix. Used to get under-18s, young pros, young schoolboys in that, like a blend in there. And then the reserves, again, a mix. You sort of your younger pros and some first teamers who had not been involved with the first team. And then obviously the big prize, then getting into that first team. But yeah, it was a funny culture because it was kind of built on. We had to clean boots back then, we had to clean toilets, we had to sweep dressing rooms, and I used to used to get the bus down to the Cliff training ground quite early in the morning as an apprentice. I used to be there for about 7 o'clock, and you had to pump the balls up, we had to get the bibs out, all the cones ready for all the teams that were going to train that morning. Might even be cleaning boots before the training started. And if there was anything wrong, if there was a flat ball or some bibs had not been loaded onto the van or a pair of boots had not been cleaned at the first team, you could have like a court case. So you'd have to go in front of all the other apprentices, and it's like a sort of you'd get like a judge and you have to hear your case and you have to say like what had happened. And just some of the punishments were a little bit like, a bit out of order. Yeah. If you'd have said like, you're going to United but you're going to get caked in boot polish or something because you're not putting balls up, or there's all sorts of stuff, and some people say, well, it brings you on, it builds your character, but to me that there's maybe better ways of doing it than that. And I think in modern football you've got to be careful that you don't go from the extremes of that to like the extreme somewhere else where you don't sort of build any character and everything's done for. It's very easy. Got to be careful you don't trip up there, because ultimately, Christy, elite level sports tough. It's not easy. It's all about, the further you go up in the game, it is all about winning. It's all about results. If you don't find results, people's jobs could be on the line, managers' jobs could be on the line. But, we've got to remember there was only 16, 17 years old, and there was some quite sort of brutal stuff, and it brings you on you don't see how it's bringing you on at the time, but, it definitely helped, I think, with character and resilience, no doubt about that. But to me, it was just more of the extreme end of maybe what I expected.
So Alex was there at that period. Was he a bit of an icon for you? Was he someone that you looked up to? Were you there to impress him, as well as other coaches there? Could you tell me a little bit about his presence at the football club?
Well, how it used to work back then was if you was in the B team or the A team, the B team used to play at a place called Littleton Road. It's about 1.5 miles from the Cliff, and the A team used to play on the Cliff, and the first team would play in the afternoon 3 o'clock kickoff. So there was a lot more 3 o'clock kickoffs back then. And what used to happen was, chances are, if Sir Alex Ferguson or Archie Knox was the assistant manager under Sir Alex at the time, they'd come and have a look at the junior games. And so I think they're very invested in youth, and they were they wanted youth to do well. They wanted to try and promote youth, because I think when Sir Alex Ferguson arrived at United, he kind of wanted to tap into Sir Matt Busby, and almost keep that youth development going. And I think that was kind of like probably one of the initial premises why he took a load of local youngsters on to kick it off, if that makes sense. And he was just what my main memories of Sir Alex were. He was kind of just ruthless, just wanted to win everything, even if it was a game of cards or snooker or table tennis, or you know, and he used to play head tennis after training had finished. Himself and Archie Knox had come into like a little gym area, and they'd say like to the apprentices, right, we want you a game of head tennis. And you're thinking, right, I've had a tough morning's training session, we've done all our duties, we've swept up and everything, clean all the boots, so a bit tired, ready to probably go home now. But he could have you there for hours, because he'd play and play and play until they won. So if you were sort of beating him in a game and it got to like, you play sort of best of 3, first to 21, and it was like, you got to sort of like 21, 20, make a stupid rule up and say, oh, you've got to win by 3 clear points and all that. And you think it could go on for hours, and you think, I've got to get my bus back here. I've got to get my bus back to Bolton, what's going on? But that was just the measure of him, he was just a winner.
Did you like that, Al? Did you like that? Was it healthy competition, or was it, I know you're a big advocate for mental health, and you know, some people could take that in a positive, some could take that in terms of a negative, and I'm sure you know, you're a lot more experienced on that psychological perspective than me, but was that healthy in terms of that element? Obviously we see the outcomes of success from that, but internally was that healthy? Did that affect players at all, or?
I think for a lot of it, you know, you see in academic literature, you look a lot about the power of a coach. They are quite powerful people, because ultimately, in a way, your destiny's in his hands. So it's like you're trying to be this authentic self and start to stick to your values, but then you've got to think, well, you know, if I don't kind of like conform in a way, if I don't do what they want you to do, you know, I'm not going to be at the club very long. So I think there's that challenge, I think, is quite difficult. You know, Sir Alex, I'm sure you've heard of his famous hairdryer as well, you know, and used to sort of test you out a little bit. But I think testing you out sometimes is not necessarily meaning it in a sort of a vociferous way, like a nasty way. I think he was kind of he might just throw one into you just to see how you react to it. But I think, you know, because you're only a young kid, 16, 17, you don't really understand that. You know, and I think what you've got to be careful of here is players just retracting into a shell a little bit, you know, and not expressing themselves as much as they could, because, you know, you got to be careful here, because fear is on this kind of borderline if you're not careful. Because if you're fearful, you know, I've seen it not just at United, you've seen it a lot of football. You just go safe with it, and you're not expressing yourself as much as you can do. So when the ball will come to you, just knock it to the winger just simply, and you think to yourself, if your confidence was high, if you wasn't playing really without that element of fear, you'd probably drive forward with the ball and maybe try to beat a couple of players. And so I think there was that element, but it's like anything else. I think what they were preparing you for is they were preparing you for the harsh world of professional football, and we know it's a tough world in there, a cruel world in a way. You know, it's almost like paradoxical. You've got all that sort of difficulty, we've got all that beauty on the other side as well when things do go well. But you know, I probably didn't realise it at the time. Probably realised it a lot more after, when you look back, because you're thinking, well, if you can't react to something in that sense, how are you going to cope at Anfield? How are you going to cope at, you know, Highbury back then, Arsenal's ground? How are you going to cope at Main Road City's ground when you've got loads of people shouting abuse at you or getting on your back? So they're just testing your character out. But for me, you know, because I'd come from a quite, almost like a little bit of an academic background, done quite well at school, maybe a little bit sensitive, a little bit shy there, maybe didn't work as well on my personality, but yeah, I think what, so it's almost like invisible skills that you've picked up. You don't realise them at the time, but they pay off for you maybe later on down your life when challenges hit.
I'm sure you know the famous class of '92. Your time was just before that, wasn't it? Was there anyone that you played with that was stood out that made a significant career?
Well, probably the main one, because he was so good, he played underage, was Ryan Giggs. You know, he was in our kind of youth team. We took him on we went to this European tournament in Italy called the Grossi Marera. He was only a schoolboy then, but he was just showing. So I think called precocious as youngsters. I think we knew that he kind of had he was destined for a good career. And I remember sort of turning up once to the cliff. We were just sort of watching the training. Used to sort of go like under 12s used to be on, under 13s, and then under 15s might be 7 till 8 or something. And we were just watching, and the session before us, like Ryan Giggs was in it. He was only spindly, thin, small lad. But I remember Eric Harrison, he was like the sort of the coach who oversaw that group of players, came over to us on the side and said, watch this lad here, he's going to be some player. But I was only 15 at the time. I didn't really know much about a 13-year-old. But
you have a different last name. It was Ryan Wilson, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. So Ryan Wilson had kind of originally, I think, Ryan played for England schoolboys as a young player, and then sort of took his mum's name after that. And but he just standing out, just pace and skill, and he had that sort of great left foot of his. He could score goals, and even playing at 15, 16 in under 18 games, in reserve games, he was standing out. But there was another kid on the right wing whose life didn't turn out, unfortunately, as well as Ryan's. That was like A.D. Doherty. He was an outstanding player too. And Oliver Kay, who's the Times journalist, writes for The Athletic now. He wrote a book about A.D. called Forever Young. And at the time, you talk about two players and their destinies. Ryan went on to make like 960 odd games, and won Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues, FA Cups. He won it all. And A.D. unfortunately had like a serious knee injury. He picked up cruciate ligament damage, and he couldn't quite get to full fitness and drifted away from the game. And unfortunately, A.D. was dead at 27 years old, a day short of his birthday. Which was tragically sad. But that's just again shows you the fine lines in football. How sort of it can work out for you, or it can't quite work out for you. Yeah, it's not easy. Some of the coaches were fantastic. Brian Kidd was my B team coach, who's just sort of retired from Man City. He had a fantastic coaching career, but he was my junior coach. He was brilliant. Brian was almost like full of praise, and he was expressive, and he sort of he told players to enjoy themselves and things like that. And they also had like another youth coach called Nobby Stiles, who was a member of the '68 team that won the European Cup. Again, a United legend, won the World Cup with England. He was very, very vocal in his praise. But Eric was like tough. Like, you talk about good cops and bad cops in football, and that stereotypically tends to be the case. You might get a manager who's quite vocal, but then you might get an assistant manager who's a little bit more arm around the shoulder, until like getting the balance right. So that was the journey. Eric was tough, and then as you went into the first team, you had Sir Alex, bad cop, and Artie Knox, even badder cop, like two tough lads in the first team environment. So, but again, it's just it's a time. It was a period that I wish I'd have enjoyed it more in a way. I wish I'd appreciated it more. But as you're travelling through on your journey of life, Chrissy, it's just almost like you look back at it and you think, I enjoyed it, we did okay, but obviously roads led me to something else. So that's kind of how it panned out for me.
You kind of come to a conclusion at Man United. So what was your thought process then? Because obviously you mentioned boyhood club and everything that you inspired to be was at Man United.
Devastated. Absolutely devastated with that. So I've done like 2-year YTS, as I say, got a year pro, and I'd had a decent season. I'd kind of like knocking in the reserves a little bit and playing in the 18 probably most of all. But the trouble back then was United's first team, they only had one sub or two subs. So like one sub, and then it evolved to a couple of subs. So you're fighting against, if you don't like somebody in the first team gets in, you say Viv Anderson. Clayton Blackmore will come in at right back. If Clayton got injured, I'd put Mickey Phelan at right back. If Mickey wasn't available, Mike Duxbury would play there. If Mike wasn't available, Dennis Irwin would cross. So you're thinking like you're about 7 or 8 down the pecking order. So I think I would say I was a good footballer, a decent footballer, but I needed a bit more to get into sort of showing maybe what I can do. But at the end of the day, Chris, like anything else in life, you can't do anything without a chance. You need a chance to prove yourself. And but yeah, I'd had a decent season, and how it worked back then was you kind of knew that contracts were up and there was going to be a bit of deselection. And so I had a decent season, and we've gone down to the wire actually in the sort of the A-team league. We pipped City to the league last game of the season. They used to have a training ground over at Platt Lane. I think Manchester University have got it now. That's where City used to be before they went to Carrington, obviously to the Etihad. And it was like a sort of a come to this last game of the season where I think we were a point ahead of them or something. So if they won, they'd win the league. If we won, we'd get it. And we'd done it. We beat them 2-1. And after the game, Fergie was watching, and he said you've been brilliant this morning. So he singled me out for a bit of praise, which was fantastic. So I thought, with contracts coming up, I thought, that sounds all right then. We won the league, you know, and opportunity here maybe to get another year or two, something like that. And so we'd done that, and then in the week, about the Tuesday or Wednesday, it was Brian Whitehouse, who was the reserve team manager, had come down to the changing room. So like, all right, Tonge, you know, Gaffer wants to see you. So I thought, here we go. So I remember looking at Brian for clues, you know, like, because you tell him face, like, is he happy, is he sad? And I was just like following like a little dog up the stairs at the cliff. So knocked on the door, like he said, Gaffer, Tonge, Alan Tonge, right, send him in. So I closed the door and he said, like, yeah, I'm going to have to move you on, son. We don't think you're sort of progressing enough to become a first team player here. So, and it was like, I sort of wrote it on my Ph.D, like it was like my body caved in, like it was like...
You're on your own?
Yeah, just because, you know, you're classified as an adult then, aren't you? So I would be sort of like, you know, I would have turned around 19, 18 and a half, 19, So yeah, it's just body caved in, and you know, I remember saying to him, like, you know, thanks for, you know, my opportunity and all that, and it's part of The Apprentice now, isn't it? You know, you've had your heart broken, but it's like, I suppose it's finding like truly who you are, because you're stripped bare, aren't you? And like your character has got to see you through that moment, because it's like, you know, you talk about like critical moments and difficult times, and you know, that was one in my life, absolutely. And you know, he said, like, you've not let me down. You've been a great lad, blah blah blah. But that's not a lot of compensation, because you want to play in that first team. That's the thing. And so I remember going out after that, and you know, as brutal as it seems, I had to go trading after that. And I remember went to Littleton Road, and just, I think you're just a sea of emotion. I think you're sort of all over the place. And like, you're not there, your body's not there, so like people were pinging balls to you in training and your touch wasn't there. And I think I remember it was Paul Ince actually, like, had a go at me for sort of like a bad touch. And I'm thinking to myself, I've just been like, my heart, bro, like, you haven't a clue, and you know, you just don't understand. And so I think that's it in football, Chrissy. I think once you know, you suffer something like that and you walk out those training grounds for the last time, you think the phone's going to ring and you think it's possibly a temporary blip. But, you know, time starts ticking by over the summer, and like no phone calls, like what am I going to be doing? And, you know, I was trying to keep myself fit a little bit, and, you know, just trying to keep myself ticking over. And I had to join a non-league side just to keep myself, you know, the fitness up, really. And but yeah, I think in relation to the you know, the deselection element, the mental health element, you know, that was a tough time in my life. That one, just a shock to the system, really, because you don't see it coming. You know, every young footballer's got dreams, of course they have, and you've got to have them, but the data tells us that there's not going to be many who realise it. And I think it's getting that, almost like a player to understand that this could happen to you, and almost trying to repair. And I think when it does happen, you're almost like still not prepared for it in a way. Because, you know, every parent, every player will think they're going to be the next first team player, which is, you know, that's the dream, isn't it? But when it kind of doesn't work out for you and it doesn't happen, it's almost like you see yourself as a failure, like low self-esteem. And I remember crossing roads in, you know, where I live, because I didn't want to speak to anybody, because ultimately what had happened is, since about 14, 15, you go on this journey and people are sort of like put you on that pedestal, like Alan the footballer. You
everyone
know,
knows you that.
It does.
Yeah, everyone knows you as that.
They do, because you know, you think about 16, 17, 18. There's so many people asking for tickets. They're asking for balls signed. Can you get me this? Can you get me this picture signed? And what happens is, when you hit your critical moment, and when you hit that moment of like disappointment and almost like tragedy in a way, like everyone disappears. Like no one's. Like even some mates in a way, you know, and I think that's maybe one of the harsh learning things that you find as well, and that is just be careful of hangers-oners. You know, I bet there's loads now around young footballers. But so I kept myself fit and ticking over, and then got the opportunity to go down to Exeter.
So how was that? So obviously leaving the Greater Manchester area, big change. Yeah. I suppose you grew up a lot even more leaving home. Yeah.
Tough. I always say this, like, so some of the podcasts I've done for the Exeter lads, and this is not sounding cruel, I didn't know where Exeter was. if it had showed me about Chris, then even though I had a reasonable education, like GCSEs, if they said, like from a geographical perspective, where's Exeter, I probably struggled to find on the map. So I did a bit of reading with them. I found that knew that they kind of got promoted from the sort of the old Division 4 as it was then. So the Premier League used to be Division 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and down. So I knew they were in Division 3. And the great thing with that is, when I was at United, I got chose to go and play in a Football League representative team in Russia, and the two managers then were Alan Ball and Laurie McMenemy, like sort of quite famous in football. So Bawley remembered me. So Bawley was born in the kind of like a town next to me. I grew up in a little place called Little Lever, and Bawley was Farnworth. He was the kind of next person on. So being a World Cup winner, and he said like he watched a few Resi games over that. He kind of remembered me from that. So he offered me an opportunity to go and play at Exeter. So off I went. I had a little Fiesta at the time. I remember my dad drawing me a map down the M6, M5, so motorway all the way, and then almost just into another world then, another culture to get used to. Man United had been very, all your kit's done for you, you get boots when you want, the club's like one of the biggest in the world, and then you arrive at Exeter, you have to wash your own kit, no canteen at the training ground. So into this other world, and fighting for my life in a way to try and resurrect my career.
Were you keen to prove a point, were you, or?
Yeah. It's a great question, Chris. I think how I saw it was, I thought the story's not over yet. Yeah. At 18, it could have been easy for me to do what a lot of young players do, which is fantastic now, and that's pick up their education again, and maybe align that with maybe playing in the non-leagues. Now, the brilliant thing in the modern days, you've got these fantastic degrees, and you can pick up your degree, but play football to a good level as well. So there was nothing like that for us back then. So in my time, in my culture, it's almost like university was kind of seen as, it wasn't going to be my natural choice at 18. Maybe back when I was a lot younger, was maybe not as many percentage of people went to uni. I always seen uni as like, remember like the open university programs in the morning when you have like these mad physics teachers and they're doing loads of statistics on boards, and that's how I saw uni. So you kind of think, well, I don't know if that's for me, my personality and what I want to sort of go on and do. So the choices that I had was kind of like, I just wanted to sort of prove it to myself that I could do it, and I knew the journey wasn't over. You're thinking, well, I've been at United since I was 14 years old. Surely, like someone will take a chance on me. But I think it was quite a courageous step, that. But it's like a lot of young people now, isn't it? They leave home and go to university at kind of 18, 19, and it's quite a courageous step, that, because you have to it brings you on a bit. You have to go and stand on your own two feet a little bit. So I went into these digs with a load of lads, 6, 7 lads, footballers, into this sort of house. I'd shared a bedroom with like a player, and 2 or 3 other lads in different bedrooms, etc. We all ate round the table together, and the family, they were there at the time, really looked after us. They were great, and then it was like moving again. Trying to get my career moving, and just an interesting step.
You mentioned the differences to Manchester United. What was it like in terms of playing in the league? Was it more physical, more demanding, more of an opportunity to express yourself? How was that in terms of playing?
I think Man United was kind of like the quality of players is like, you're talking elite footballers here. So at United, if you got the ball at fullback, you'd know that, say, Giggsy would be spinning into the corner, so you could just like clip it into him. Whereas maybe you might not get that at like a league or two down. And I think the speed as well and the physicality was different. Speed at United was kind of like, if you didn't close someone down quick enough, the ball would be gone past you. Whereas maybe it slows a little bit as you go down the league system. But the good thing with Alan Ball is he wanted to play football. You hear a lot of tales of players moving downwards and they were in midfield and the ball's just going over their head all the time. But Ball, he wanted you to play, and he encouraged that, which was fantastic. And I managed to sort of get my debut. Played against Wigan Athletic. Funny encounter, got beat 1-0 in the 89th minute. Welcome to professional football. And from then it was kind of just trying to establish myself and just try and get into the team on a kind of a regular basis. But again, it's like anything else. We know, that's one thing I know about pro football. It's not easy. It's tough. You can have like losses of form, you can have injuries, little niggly injuries. Culture was very different back then. You train sort of in the morning, 9 times out of 10 in the afternoon you'd probably end up in the bookies or a pub or having a games of pool, and just a lack of education, I think, around looking after yourself. It's almost lost in this world. And I've seen some of the Exeter lads recently. We had a vets game, and they were saying that our recollection of it was just like a 3 or 4 year stag do, really. You played your football and then it's just like mad off the field. You talk about the social media explosion now and the camera phones and all that, and or Instagram and all that. And you think, like, if it was there back then, good grief, it would have been a nightmare. But yes, lack of education, lack of understanding, and football was kind of just embracing almost like this overlap of the old into the new. I think Gary Neville, he speaks about it, and about the sort of the United Liverpool side in the early 90s, and talks about the drinking culture that some of the teams. And he said, well, when Cantona arrived, if we knew we'd behave ourselves a little bit more, that would give us an advantage. And that it started to turn, and the Premier League obviously arrived, Christy, didn't it? And almost in a way very, very scientific now, isn't it? We've got performance analysis, the scrutiny, the nutrition. We've got all sorts of aids now, haven't we, in relation to heart rates and trackers, and everything's sort of measured now. So it has exploded like quite a lot. But back then, you look at it and you think, yeah, tough world, and definitely a lot of mental health related material and issues going around.
Just on that point, in terms of the multidisciplinaries that you see in the modern game in comparison to your own, do you feel that you could have been represented a little bit more better? You get a feeling that if you were represented from another figure, especially going into those conversations with Sir Alex and finding another club, do you think that could have helped you at all in terms of your professional career? I'm just curious to find out what you think about that.
I think what was happening back then, Christy, is kind of the top players in the game. So your lads who were around the club, like your Brian Robsons, Norman Whitesides, Paul McGraths, they probably did have agents, but the young players, younger pros, they didn't. The agent was kind of like not really done and dusted then. So everything that you did was driven by yourself. Everything that you had to. It may be in a good way, maybe it makes you grow up and build your character in a way, but, it's quite nerve-wracking going into a negotiation, isn't it, and saying, when I signed my pro contract at United, it was almost like, this is what you're getting. And because, again, we're back to that, almost like that sort of heart rule in your head, give us the pen. Definitely, that sounds great, but probably the worst contract I could ever sign. Maybe at that stage of my life, if I had a bit more wisdom, I would have said, any chance of a 2-year deal, or maybe even stretch it to 3, so I can maybe communicate a little bit better and say, I can get into this and set a plan out, and it gives you a little bit of time to build on. Whereas the 1-year deal, it's like pressure's right on you again to prove yourself. And I think that was, like you say, the agents now really help with that. Whereas in our era, in our culture, it was kind of like you didn't really have anybody representing you apart from yourself.
So you had a bad back injury that ended your footballing career. How was that experience in terms of you playing? You mentioned identity as well, and all you know is football, but you kind of understand that maybe that there needs to be another thread to your career.
It was a tough one, really, because I knew there was something wrong with it. It was probably because I've been through this culture of like, I've got to keep going, got to be macho, you got to battle on and all that. And I knew there was something not quite right, but I knew that also that my contract was kind of coming up for renewal. And I had to try and play some games in order to secure myself another one. And it was just steadily, Chris, I was getting like pins and needles down my arms and my legs, and I was getting, it was turning in where you were struggling to pull your socks on and stuff like that. I knew there was something right, but I was stupid, I kept playing with it. And it got to a stage where I remember going to Swansea City away, and my mate at the time, my best friend in Exeter, Dave Cooper, he said to me, Bally had done all the set plays and all that and ready to go, and we were sat in, this is where Swansea used to play at a ground called the Vetch Field, like their old ground. And I said to Coots before the game, I said, I'm struggling here. And I said, shall I tell Bally? And he said, you can't tell Bally now, I'll go ballistic. He said, you've done all the set pieces with you and you know what you're doing. And so I thought, right, I'll get a load of deep heat, like that in the tube, rubbed it all over my back. And I thought I'll just try and get through it, but I was really struggling. And I was playing up against a lad who was quite a good footballer at the time called Andy Legg. He played on the left wing for Swansea, like really talented. And you're like just trying to protect yourself. And then, after that game, I said to the physio Mike Chapman, like I've got to do something here because I'm not right. So he sent me for an MRI scan and come back and he said it's in a mess. The bottom of your back's in a mess. You need surgery on this immediately. So it led to 2 operations. I had screws and plates in my spine put in. And you're thinking to yourself, the surgeon afterwards, he said, if you'd have had one bad tackle in that game or you'd have fell funny, so your disc could have severed your spinal nerves. And he said that could have been you would have been in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. And I thought to myself, is football worth that? What am I thinking? What am I thinking about? Oh, come on, dig in and all that. And so that was that. And just I think I was about 21 and a half, 22 years old. That's it. And trying to recover from something as severe as that. And another problem that I had, Christy, was the managers had changed at Exeter. So Alan Ball had gone to Southampton, got a job there, and a lad called Terry Cooper had come in. He was another England footballer, old Leeds player, and it was clear that he didn't really want a lot of ball. He was like, that's it with football as well. You get a manager and they want to bring all their players in that they know, and they don't want to have all the other managers' staff. So it was clear from day one while I was doing my rehab, you don't really, always saying, how's that injury going, in blah, blah, blah. And I knew that. I felt I didn't feel welcome there. So I did my rehab and I got to the end of kind of my contract and I just thought, I don't know. I said, I had a chat with the surgeon and they said, you're not going to, I wouldn't recommend you playing full-time football now because it's quite demanding. And I think one of the psychological things, Chrissy, that I was worried about was getting a knee in the back or something. Going up for a header and someone kneeing it. So I said to the surgeon and Terry Cooper at the time, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm gonna call it a day, full time wise, and maybe take my life into another direction somewhere else.
What was your psychological state like during that period?
Well, I think we saw talk about that grief model, haven't we? Looking at kind of the different stages of grief in a way. You got the denial thing, sort of thinking about, still going out to pubs and talking as though you're still a footballer, and you're not. You're thinking to yourself, if I got myself fit again and do some running and do weights, can I get back to the level? And go into this period of denial, and then I think that kind of led into a spiral of just, I would say probably just completely lost because, back in those days, football opportunities were quite thin on the ground, and you think it's only a 23, 24-year-old sort of young man you're talking about here, that we didn't have any under 14s you could go and coach, or it was you had first team manager, assistant manager, physio, resi manager maybe, and you're thinking where am I going to go here? So I remember a lad at Exeter at the time who's sadly gone, passed away now, called Eamon Dolan. He was the old manager. He said to me he could do some coaching in the community hours, which was great. But the trouble with them, Chris, it was just very seasonal, like Easter, Christmas. It wasn't enough. So I think I'd say for 4 years, just completely lost. Went through a series of jobs, just trying to bring some income in, van driving, warehouse work, working nights and stuff like that, and just a period of sort of probably drinking more than I should do, probably gambling more than I should do, probably overeating a bit. It was all bad habits, but the symptoms of you completely I think probably the best way to explain it is your identity's just been obliterated. You don't know where you're going now, who you are. Yeah, probably identity crisis at that time because you're ex-footballer, not footballer anymore. But it was finding something to replace that, I think, was the challenge. That was the challenge because, football brings you to incredible, exhilarating things like, scoring goals in front of away fans and winning games and clapping fans after that. There's not quite a lot to replace that afterwards once that's gone. And I understand why people fall into voids after that. And it's just looking for direction and finding a purpose and a meaning again to go forward. So I would probably say 3 or 4 years after that, very lost.
What could have been done to help you there in terms of that practice?
I think just more I think just more options for support. I think to maybe I just needed somebody to grab me at that time and just have a look at my options going forwards. I think you just left, like a lot of people say, well, you're 24 years old, but you're just drifting, like you're drifting around. And I think the PFA are brilliant. I think they did some great stuff for me. Like they helped me in relation to, my monies and my insurances and stuff like that. That's fantastic. But I think I almost needed like careers advice then. Like someone to sit down and say, right, what's your background? What do you enjoy? What would you like to do? And it might have saved me a few years and drifting around, trying to find something myself. I think once you're a bit isolated and you're a bit lost, and of course, Chris, you've got all that free time on your hands as well, haven't you? In a day like that, you're not doing anything. And you think to yourself, I heard this phrase once I thought was really interesting, and someone said to me, it was a doctor actually, and he said, an idle mind is the devil's playground. And I thought that probably summed me up at the time. You've got all this time that you do, but it takes you down bad stuff, like going into pubs, drinking, gambling, going down the bad stuff. And I think that's probably at that time, I wish someone had I think to save me a year or two, just maybe say, you got an appointment with the PFA or something at 2:00, or they want to chat to you, can you bring your CV with you? And like maybe just general workshops like that. But there's nothing really to tap into then.
How did university and the kind of the academic journey start and begin for you?
Just out of the blue, really. It was just a family member who said, do you not fancy upskilling? Like doing a course. And like I say, I think university back then was, I wasn't the person at the back of the school class throwing rubbers at the teacher, messing about. Or,
sure.
Yeah, I know. Or like, I think you used to call it, I don't know if it still happens, wagging it or something, like, should we go at 10:30? Let's leave now. I wasn't one of them, but I wasn't the one at the front either getting 100% in maths, and they're probably professors at physics now at Oxford. I was kind of in the middle, a bit of an interest in football and a bit of an interest in academia, not in relation to completely like sort of ignore it and see no importance to it. I did, but I was just kind of in the middle group, and I think that was the key thing really to sort of like maybe get my life moving again. Is kind of a family member saying to me, "Do you fancy doing a course?" So I went to it was called Bolton Institute. It's the University of Bolton now, and just asking a staff member there, like probably on an open day or something like that. He said, we've got this kind of course that you might be interested in, sports science. So I've obviously got a sporting interest. But it was like, it's that far back, Chris, that you had to be joined with something. So these days, in modern universities, you can get full sports science provision, of course. But back then, you had to have like sports science and leisure. I enjoyed the sports science side and the fitness stuff and the conditioning and all the psychology, brilliant. But then the leisure stuff was very, sport development and coaching, that's great. I really enjoyed that, but it's like a lot of policy, a lot of legislation to sort of learn. Anyway, so I did that, and that was probably the first time I've had a inkling of maybe something I could do, because I was watching the lectures and now they sort of went about their daily routines and practices, and I thought, maybe this is something that I could do, later on down the line. So all of a sudden then you're starting to see a little bit of, maybe a bit of clarity from haze, something become a bit clearer for me. And I think from them was kind of like, maybe just got the educational bug in a way. Yeah. When I did my degree, and then I, after that I did a PGCE straight away. So again, trying to just to get something behind me, some more identity to me as a person. So like I say, from then I was quite lucky. I got a job straight away, a lecturer in sport at a college. But I think probably with the experiences that I had in the past, I could shape that into my academic experiences and the disappointments I had in football, and almost like not necessarily giving everybody academic knowledge, but shaping youngsters and trying to get them ready for next steps in a way.
Let's talk about your Ph.D. then. Yeah. So obviously you're very influenced by obviously your experiences as a footballer, injury and disappointment, as you kind of alluded to throughout. So what was the idea? How did it come about, and how did you go through the stages of completing it?
Yeah, well, it's always something that I see a lot of academic literature that looks at academy movement and the academy journey in a way, and anything I suppose from the 9s to 16s and onwards up until you become a pro. But then because of different reasons, maybe issues of confidentiality and trust and access, of course, not a lot of research in the pro world. So I thought maybe I could sort of start a sea change in that area and almost, try and do a little bit of work within, the professional game, just to try and shine a little bit of light on it. Because, as you correctly said, Chrissy, I think what's quite concerning for me from a lived perspective, but still reading, so many athletes, so many pro footballers are having challenges, difficulties, and almost like from a research perspective thinking, where are these challenges and difficulties coming from? From a neutral observer, from somebody who looks at it from the outside in, you're almost thinking, well, they're on big salaries, they're keeping fit every day, got a lot of esteem, a lot of public esteem. It's a fantastic life, but then suffering with mental health problems and challenges and difficulties. So I think the idea really from my PhD was trying to explore that and trying to shed a little bit of light on why this might be happening, drawing on both my own experiences and then talking to pros in the game, in the modern game, a lot closer to the game than I kind of was many years ago. And you're kind of thinking, well, that was happening to me sort of 1995. Why is it still happening? 2022. That can't be right. So it's just trying to do a little bit of work in relation to what could be potentially helpful in order to try and support players in their journey through professional football and out of the other side.
You mentioned then around the salaries and the opportunities that you had in your career in comparison to maybe the external outcomes we see within the modern game today, but we still have these potential issues around mental health and mental well-being. Do you think it's changed to some extent in terms of how we recognise issues around mental health and how we can ensure that players are protected within the demographic of football?
I think like anything else, Christy, cultural change or things that are brought in to change something never happen overnight. And I think at the moment you could probably say that there's a lot of good things happening and a lot of more awareness, and you see a lot of external support organisations going into football clubs to deliver mental health workshops and things like that. So I think we're getting more understanding of it. I think that like anything else, there's always more that can be done. I think there's always more that can be achieved, but a lot of it, Christy, I think what I learned is really down to choice, isn't it? Everybody's got a choice. And just looking at the papers earlier on today, Jack Grealish is coming under a little bit of fire for his choice of friends while he's away or what he's got around him at the moment. And you're right. I think what we do know with football is it does attract people that are not necessarily in your corner a lot. They like to be around you. They like to be around you. They like to be almost like fame touches, I call them in a way. But I think what you've got to recognise, Christy, is to try and get good people around you. I think that's really important. People always want to be around you for a pint, or if you're outside, it's different in the modern game. But a lot of people will be always minding you for tickets and for things, get stuff and things like that. But is that for the right reason sometimes, or where are those when you hit your moments of difficulty? They're nowhere to be seen. So
it's more life in general, really. Obviously, we're looking at it from the lens of football, but that could branch out in with people in business, people that have wealth. I'm sure that there's a lot of alignment within that as well.
Yeah, very very much so. There's a lot of transferability, isn't there, within different parts of research, different types of research. So, but I think what's quite surprising in my PhD is there's still a lot of work I think that can be done. I think one of the questions that I asked the players were, do you feel as though you're supported enough within football clubs when you have critical moments? And quite a high percentage said that they weren't. They felt as though they couldn't really go to anybody else. So it's quite interesting that, because you're thinking that, why is that? Is it still to this day a little bit of machoism, a little bit of ruthlessness, a little bit of culture that's in there that you can't show weakness or you can't open up, or something's stopping it? Because out of my sample of 212 players, quite a high percentage said they prefer to work things out themselves. So it's still there. There's still that element that maybe needs to be broke down a little bit. And I think some of the findings can maybe be used to drive maybe change in a way. I'd like to maybe get some more applied presentations out there, in different conferences and maybe getting into clubs and stuff like that. And like a lot of ex-footballers, just speaking to players and from a lived experience as well. But I think one thing that's quite important, I think, like anything else, is that it's that broadening your identity element, isn't it? Making sure that you're not just that thing in a way that's, and I think that thing is harder to give up, or when you're getting lots of adulation and you're winning lots of awards and accolades, but football, it can change so quick. That's the thing with it. And if you hang on to that thing and not develop yourself more broadly around it, I think when moments do hit, from a mental health perspective, that can be quite challenging.
So, obviously, you are now a doctor. Congratulations. What's the future then for Alan? Do you want to continue down this route in terms of player welfare, player support, research? You're doing your commentary part-time as well with BBC Devon. So is this the kind of route you want to continue down, or is there anything that you've thought about just on reflection of maybe your career where you might see yourself in the future?
Yeah, I think been working with like Dr Richard Elliott and Tom Buck, who Chris, he's a colleague. I was on a sort of a project recently and getting a sort of a elite player care certificate out there. So we sort of wrote that, and we're just coming to the end, in early July, of getting the first cohort through on that. So I had the opportunity as well to go to Miami a couple of weeks ago to deliver a player care certificate out there as well in the States, which is fantastic. So we kind of like keep looking to hopefully grow that. I think the university has got ambitions to try and get a player care masters on board, and it's just nice because I can just tap into sort of some of the experiences and then some of the writing that I've done to sort of align that in the right manner. I think the commentary is fantastic. I really enjoy that. I'd get the opportunity to comment and summarise Exeter City games when they come up into the north. So they had a good season last season. They managed to finish second in League Two and got promoted to League One. So an opportunity to get to some new grounds this season, hopefully. I'm also, I'd say, about 2/3 of the way through a book at the moment that I'm writing with somebody in relation to quite a range of issues, really. Transitions and critical moments and my journey, and some tales of Fergie, some tales of Giggsy, AD Doherty, who I spoke about earlier. So that's called From Red to Red. So from Red United to Red as a doctor, READ. So I'll just weave in some tales on that. So I've done about 5 chapters on that so far. So that's sort of a project that I'll be keeping going on as well. And then I'd probably say it, Chrissy, that maybe looking to get into a club somewhere, whether that's part-time, that might be the ambitions for my next steps. If that's Manchester United, that would be fantastic, because it almost that'd be like a fulfilling a prophecy in a way. It's almost like closing a loop, isn't it? And you never know, because I'm a sort of probably a Red at heart, a Man United fan. Could I give the same application and dedication to maybe working with Liverpool's youngsters or City's youngsters? But maybe not. Maybe not. So that's the problem with that sort of attitude, though, because it closes down to very narrow. And but you never know. Something like that would be quite good, especially with my doctorate and my player care background and my experiences. I'm sure I could provide some good advice and guidance to both academy players and young pros, and even first team players as well, because I know the pitfalls, I know the problems, I know the issues, and I know that if you do take your eye off the ball just for 1 second in professional football, it can give you a kicking.
So last question, Alan. So I always ask each guest this question. If you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
It's a good question, going back into the past, and and it'd be great, wouldn't it, if we could rewind our lives and start again. But I think probably from a football perspective, Christy, at United, if I was being totally candid, totally honest, probably believed in myself a bit more. I should have been knocking on Fergie's door. I should have had that almost like, I'll say, a bit of extra swagger amongst yourself, but I think you need that to get on. And I think with my personality, maybe a bit shy and sensitive, it didn't really pay off at the time. I don't say that there's anything wrong with shy and sensitive, but you have to develop other components to yourself as well. And I think sort of knocking on Fergie's door, or go on, can I have a chat with you, Eric, and all that. Maybe I should have just had that a little bit more courage to fight that and sort it out. But I think from that, I think probably one of the most pleasing things that I could reflect on is moving on from that. I think it was Ernest Hemingway who said, "A man can be destroyed but not beaten." And I think that's probably a good way to maybe finish it.
Thank you so much.
All right, Chris. Thank you.
Mate.